Tensions mount between Washington and Moscow after a Russian fighter jet struck an American surveillance drone over the Black Sea. Frayed relations between Washington and Moscow have become even more tense after a Russian fighter jet struck an American surveillance drone over the Black Sea on Tuesday, forcing the US to bring it down in international waters. The White House is calling it reckless and unsafe, while Moscow has described it as a provocation.
What we saw, again, were fighter aircraft dumping fuel in front of this UAV and then getting so close to the aircraft that it actually damaged the propeller on the MQ-9. Because of the damage, we were in a position to have to essentially crash it into the Black Sea.
Russia's ambassador to the US was later summoned to the State Department, but not before justifying the actions of the Russian pilots.
This drone can carry 1,700 kilos of explosives. This drone can carry a few bombs. You see that what will be the reaction of United States if you see such Russian drone very close, for example, to San Francisco or New York? What will be reaction of United States? For me, it's clear.
Russian and US aircraft have operated over the Black Sea since the start of the war, but this is the first known interaction. The Pentagon has warned such actions could lead to miscalculation and unintended escalation.
Orthodox monks from Kyiv's 11th century Pechersk Lavra Monastery are fighting eviction by the Ukrainian government because of their church's links with Russia. The ancient golden-domed religious complex is the country's most significant Orthodox monastery. Until recently, the monks in residence fell under Moscow's jurisdiction. However, they say they broke with the Russian Orthodox Church after its leader, Patriarch Kirill, backed the invasion of Ukraine last year. Kyiv's government remains unconvinced, but the monks deny any Kremlin links.
Столетиями относимся, не где-то как-то, мы столетиями относимся к церкви, которая имеет своим началом вот патриарха, и по этой причине делать из нас каких-то там, я не знаю, иноагентов, или я даже не знаю, как они там формулируют, кто мы для них, врагов делать. Это, конечно, не так. Это неправда. Это наш народ, это наша земля. И это наша лавра, которая наша.
Despite numerous cars having been seen leaving the monastery, its head, Pavlo Lebed, stood outside vowing no intention of moving, even though the lease has already been terminated. Ukraine has recently established its own branch of the Orthodox Church, but Moscow's Patriarchate refuses to recognize it.
A prominent German politician has issued a scathing assessment of her country's drive to boost its military following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Parliamentary Commissioner for the Armed Forces, Eva Hugel, claims not a single euro of a €100 billion fund approved by MPs had been spent.
Ich beginne mal mit dem Thema Material und fasse das in den Satz zusammen, die Bundeswehr hat von allem zu wenig. Und sie hat seit dem 24. Februar 2022 noch weniger. Das betrifft die Ausbildung, das betrifft die Übungen und das betrifft auch die Ausstattung im Einsatz.
Last year, Chancellor Scholz received a standing ovation in Parliament when he announced the end of Germany's pacifist tradition. The policy included a commitment to NATO's spending target of 2% of GDP for defence, as well as the new special military fund. Hugel also cast doubt over whether a goal of recruiting 203,000 soldiers by 2031 would be achieved. Her criticism joins a chorus of lawmakers and officials who have called for faster supplies and funding for the military. Despite the lack of spending on its own forces, Germany has sent large amounts of military aid to Ukraine over the past year and recently promised to send its highly sought-after Leopard 2 tanks.
The centre of Kramatorsk in eastern Ukraine was the target of fresh Russian bombings on Tuesday. In an all too familiar scene, residential buildings were hit. At least one person was killed and several others injured. According to local authorities, the Russian strikes damaged 9 apartment blocks and a children's preschool. Kramatorsk has been a significant battleground since 2014, when pro-Russian forces occupied Donetsk before being driven out in July 2014, bringing the city back under Ukrainian control. These attacks come as Sergei Shoigu, the Russian defense minister, ordered the doubling of the production of precision-guided weapons during a visit to one of Russia's leading arms manufacturers. In the east, Ukrainian forces on the front line continue to be pounded by Russian artillery. On Tuesday, the Ukrainian Interior Ministry said Russian forces launched deadly rocket strikes against civilian infrastructure in Sumy and the Donetsk region.
A replica of the concrete punishment cell that Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny is periodically held in has been unveiled near the Louvre in Paris. The installation shows the conditions that the opposition politician has been subjected to in the penal colony in the Vladimir region where he's being detained. Navalny has spent more than 100 days of the past 6 months in the punishment cell. His team said they set up the replica to raise awareness of the dire conditions he faces.
The Russian lower house has approved an amendment which, if approved by the upper house and President Putin, will punish anyone who publishes false information or attempts to discredit the volunteer groups fighting in Ukraine with up to 15 years in prison. This is an extension of the laws passed by the Russian government a year ago, which sought to suppress any criticism of the so-called special military operation in Ukraine. Yevgeny Prigozhin, leader of the mercenary group Wagner, welcomes the news, having asked the Russian parliament in January to extend the laws to ban negative media reports about his men. Up until now, it was only Russia's military that was protected. This comes on the same day that the Lithuanian parliament declared Wagner a terrorist group. In its resolution, it states that Russian mercenaries have committed serious crimes, which amounts to terrorism. Wagner has played an important role in Russia's offensive, but the Battle of Bakhmut has revealed tensions between the group's leadership and the Russian army.
President Biden has made another bid to tighten gun control in the US. He signed an executive order to increase the number of background checks needed before being able to buy a firearm. The order is aimed at moving the US as close to universal background checks as possible without additional legislation, and does not need the approval of Congress. At present, laws vary from state to state. Last year, Biden attempted to push a law banning assault weapons, but it's unlikely to get far with Republicans in control of the US House of Representatives. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad is in Moscow to meet with his top ally, Russian President Vladimir Putin, as the Kremlin steps up efforts to restore ties between Turkey and Syria. The visit comes on the anniversary of the uprising turned civil war in Syria. Moscow has played a pivotal role in fighting back armed opposition groups trying to topple Assad's government through its military support, and has aggressively backed Damascus against opponents at the United Nations. In a statement, the Kremlin said the talks would aim to strengthen ties in political, trade, economic and humanitarian spheres, as well as the prospects for a comprehensive settlement of the situation in and around Syria. Russian media said relations between Damascus and Ankara would also be on the table. The civil war in Syria has killed nearly 500,000 people and displaced half the country's pre-war population.
Five goals from Erling Haaland helped Manchester City breeze through their Champions League last 16 second-leg tie against German side RB Leipzig with an emphatic 7-0 win. The 22-year-old Norwegian striker is now the fastest and youngest player to reach 30 goals in the Champions League, and the competition's joint youngest player to score 5 times in a single game.
The problem with this guy is every time we don't score 2 or 3 goals, we'll be criticized for the next of his career. This is the reality, but yeah, it was said many times. He was a joy of guy, and his mood in the locker room, always happiness, and built or give to all of us, and he's a a huge competitor. The mentality is there, and score 5 goals always is not easy.
In Tuesday's other tie, Inter Milan booked their place in the quarter-finals thanks to a 1-0 win on aggregate over Porto. Inter joined Manchester City in Friday's quarter-final draw, along with rivals AC Milan, Bayern Munich, Benfica and Chelsea. Liverpool will be hoping for a miracle when they face reigning champions Real Madrid in the last 16 of the Champions League this evening after being swept aside at Anfield in the first leg. Los Blancos romped to a 5-2 victory in England 3 weeks ago, thanks in no small part to a brace from Karim Benzema, who, like fellow Frenchman Ferland Mendy, is set to make his return to the starting lineup. Madrid are expected to miss David Alaba due to injury, while Jurgen Klopp will be without Luis Diaz, Jordan Henderson and Thiago Alcantara.
If there is only 1% chance, I would like to give it a try. So we are here to play an extremely strong opponent and try to win the game tomorrow. And as difficult as it is, that's probably possible. Not likely, but possible.
Napoli, meanwhile, will be keen to pick up from where they left off as they host Frankfurt on the back of a 2-0 first-leg win in Germany. Unless Oliver Glasner's men achieve something special, the Italian club look likely to reach the quarter-finals of the Champions League for the first time in their history.